Right, welcome back. Israel is today set to appear before the International Court of Justice in The Hague in the Netherlands, and they are expected to defend themselves against genocide charges. Now, it called the case that South Africa brought one of the greatest shows of hypocrisy in history. And yesterday, South Africa presented its genocide case against Israel, arguing that Israel has actively pursued the erasure of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Now, South Africa is seeking a provisional order that will stop Israel from continuing its bombardment of Gaza. Israel is a signatory to the Genocide Convention of 1948, which defines genocide and commits states to prevent it. Now, to help us unpack the latest developments and, of course, South Africa's presentation and look at Israel's possible defense today, we're joined in studio by the head of diplomacy and foreign policy at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Chris Landsberg. Prof, thanks so much. Good to have you in studio so early in the new year, but we've hit the ground running.
All the best for 2024.
Thank you. So here we are. South Africa, of course, bringing this application late last year. And now we heard yesterday South Africa's, their case against Israel, claiming that Israel is committing acts of genocide in Gaza. But before we get to the merits of South Africa's presentation yesterday, I just want to go back to those who have joined South Africa's application, and more importantly, perhaps in that group of countries and also other entities, Belgium entered the fray.
What is so fascinating, if we go through some of the interviews we did last year, so early in the year, what we're seeing is the makings of a divided world. I mean, no longer are countries of the South scared to speak out against America in particular, NATO and the G7 in general. This case is going to reinforce it, I suggest to you. You make the case about Belgium. What's also fascinating about Belgium, it's one of the 15 members on the court at the moment. It's not just that they threw their weight behind South Africa, is that their judge, we can surmise where his vote is going to. Europe is deeply divided. I mean, I was struck by a comment that President Erdogan of Turkey made about Germany. It literally said to he literally said to his German counterpart, Chancellor Olaf, that you Germans must get over your genocide guilt. That the reason why you're not criticizing Israel is because every time you're going to say something negative about Israel, they're going to throw in your face that you committed genocide in the 1940s. I think many states are sitting there with bated breath, but if I could say positive about the divisions that are playing out in Europe, in the West, countries in the South, countries that are being cajoled by America and others to vote a certain way or to support a certain way, as we saw the other day with the vote on the UN Human Rights Council, is that it's almost that they are glad that you had a bold country, South Africa of all, that took this case so early to the ICJ. And I conclude, Sakina, by your point. It is the rapidity, the speed with which South Africa took this matter to the ICJ, having already taken it to the ICC, but taking it to the ICJ, South Africa wants a line to be drawn in the sand somehow.
Now, you know, we look at this, and again, before we get to the merits of what happened yesterday, you look at what's happening now with the United States and the UK and what's happening in the Red Sea. And there is, of course, concern, as you say, geopolitically, we're seemingly becoming more unstable, even at the beginning of this year. So that particular issue with the Houthi from Yemen, and how does that impact on what is going on in Gaza?
What is so fascinating about your comment, and I'm going to be very critical of America here, I I follow Anthony Blinken as Secretary of State very closely, just because he's the Secretary of State and he deals with diplomacy, and they see themselves as the world's most important power. And I find it difficult sometimes to square the actions of Anthony Blinken with the rhetoric, or I find it difficult to find what he says in one country and then fly over to another country. He's now on his fifth round of shuttle diplomacy in the region. Let me give you an example. He didn't mince his words day before yesterday in Israel about rubbishing South Africa's case, literally calling it a distraction. But here's the point I want to make about America. This concern that has been expressed that this war could be broadened, I think it's real. I think Israel and America would not just want to deal with the Houthis in the Red Sea and their attacks, and now that America and Britain has entered the fray. And of course, the Houthis also would like to expand it in solidarity with the Palestinians. I actually think America is after Iran. So you get to Iran by provoking Hezbollah to get involved in the war, and you make it difficult for Iran. Iran so far has really bite his tongue, if you like, and said, we're not going to get involved. And many Arab and Islamic states, Turkey in particular, say to Iran, don't make mistakes.
But why are they after Iran? Why would they want to provoke them?
Well, because Iran is really seen, I mean, to call it the naughty child of the Middle East would be really doing a disservice. I'm looking for a more appropriate word. Is seen as the real aggressor, the provoker, the provocateur in that region. And remember, they have purportedly, and I say purportedly, remember Colin Powell's statement about Iraq. They purportedly have weapons of mass destruction, but I can tell you now, Israel has a policy of strategic ambiguity. We neither confirm nor deny. That's why the deputy minister in Israel made that point about why don't we just use nuclear weapons and wipe out the Palestinians. No, they really have a big beef with Iran. And there's another reason why they have beef with Iran. There is no doubt that Iran is supportive of these states who believe that Israel has for 75 years suppressed the Palestinians, stolen land from that country, and it did have a policy of the non-existence of Israel. So there's a real issue there with Iran.
So all of that, will obviously play out in the days, weeks, and years to come. But at the moment, the application brought by South Africa to the International Court of Justice is that of genocide perpetrated by Israel in Gaza. And you had that South African team yesterday who obviously have the burden of proof. They needed to show that there is indeed evidence to substantiate this claim of genocide. What's your assessment of how they did?
When Leanne and yourself went through the newspaper clippings this morning, I mean, there's something, and here I'm going to sort of take a different slant to others. I was surprised at even how the president celebrated the performance of South Africa. In your introduction now, you just read some ominous words, eh? I mean, Israel described South Africa's performance yesterday as a greater sign of hypocrisy. That's the word that they use. If we think that the Israelis are coming today with kid gloves, I think we're making a mistake. I belong to those analysts who think that thus far, Israel has really politicized their response to South Africa. But when D-Day came, you saw how serious their team is, also with judges and the like. And I think they are going to politicize it, by the way. Let me give you a couple of examples, what I think is going to happen today. But before that, let me give South Africa kudos. I think it was methodical, it was good, it was a good lesson in law for law students to see and how South Africa just systematically go to the case, trying to prove genocide, right? There are certain things that South Africa did not say that I expected them to say to reinforce their case. Let me just give you the 2 points that I think they could have hammered on. One is, I do think there is a policy on the part of Israel to push as many Palestinians to the fringes, literally to the fringes of the borders, in the hope that Jordan and Egypt in particular would literally make them, take them in as refugees and make them citizens, and you turn 4 million Palestinians into even more. Since 1948, we have a situation that there are more Palestinians living outside the borders of Palestine and are refugees than inside. I expected them to push that. But the real political one that I expected them to push it is this point that for 75 years, right, there's been suppression. What do you expect people to do? At some point, they're going to take up arms and they're going to do a 7th of October. Well, I've now just said it, so it's out there. Let's come now to Israel. Israel is really going to go heavy on South Africa today. First thing, they're going to make a link between Israel, between the ANC historically and Hamas. And one of the things that I found a bit curious, this is now me speaking, right? I can't speak for others, is Hamas leaders that is standing with South Africa outside the court yesterday. I think there could have been a bit more sort of, strategic calculation and not let the relationship be, because Israel is going to hammer on that. Israel is going to build this case on the 7th of October and say South Africa downplayed the 7th of October. And they're basically going to say that they face the existential threat and that there's a real threat at Israel, and that's why they're doing it. And they're going to downplay that they went after civilians, even though it's patently obvious for everybody to see that destroying the infrastructure and creating, quote unquote, the conditions for a people to live in subhuman circumstances that could lead to death. That's what they're going to do today.
So, and in mounting that defense, of course, I would imagine Israel would say that they are doing this for, as they've always said, that Hamas uses the civilian population as human shields in Gaza. So, is that something that, can they validly make that claim to substantiate why they have killed over 25,000 people?
They are going to make that case. They're going to say the reason why there are 23,000, and by the way, I think the number is much more than 20,000.
It's more than 25 at the moment.
Because of the number of people laying under the rubble. They are going to make that case. Let me just tell you one other weakness, quote unquote weakness, that Israel is going to pounce on today. And it was interesting to see that the well-respected, many of us have interacted with him, the respected Professor John Dugard is really arguably the foremost international law scholar that we have in the country. That point about jurisdiction is going to loom large today. So what do we mean by jurisdiction, and why is it such a big issue? South Africa, why did you bring this case to? What do you have to do with this war? Yeah, how does it affect you? Almost in a sense trying to make the link that, as they call South Africa, the legal spokesperson for Hamas. But they're going to say to South Africa, but you don't really have a sort of a say in this war. Why does it affect you? And what Professor John Dugard and others, Judge Advocate Lowe did yesterday, was to say Hamas is not a state party. Hamas is, if you want, a militant group, a military organization, a paramilitary group, and if you want to use Israel's language, a terrorist organization. So they cannot. They're not a member of the Rome Statute. So we took it up on their behalf. It's unprecedented, and the ICC might just, sorry, not the ICC, the ICJ might just mention that to South Africa. That brings me to a very crucial point, Sakina. All 15 judges, including the president of the court, the American, are political appointees. Right. This thing is going to come down to a vote. And I predict a split decision and maybe a nuanced decision that, yeah, Israel has a right and, yeah, but we must stop the war and stuff. Because what happens after this, after they've pronounced on let's say, hypothetically, in South Africa's case, as we made our closing arguments, the hostilities should cease, the genocide would end. What they're going to say is that now we must go investigate, and this could go on for years. What South Africa wants, though, is for the hostilities to end and to end immediately. But today, it's not going to be a walk in the park for South Africa.
Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Head of Diplomacy and Foreign Policy at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Chris Landsberg, helping us unpack what happened in the ICJ yesterday, and of course, looking ahead at what Israel could present to the court today.